Um, Welcome. My name is Hallie Caldwell. I'm a member of the Quad Education team, and you are here to learn about Ivy Plus schools and what they are, how to apply. We'll dive in. We have two fantastic Quad Education consultants here with us who work with students and families on applying to all types of schools, including Ivy Plus. And they're going to walk us through this topic and give us all of their expertise on this matter, give you some tips and tricks, and then answer your questions at the end. And just for those of you who may not know, Quad Education is an application consulting company, and we work with students and families from early middle school all the way through the end of high school on building their college profile, working on their college applications, choosing extracurriculars, writing personal statements, studying for the SAT, ACT, really everything involved with the college application process, we are here to help with. All right, so let's dive in. So today we'll introduce our two panelists who you'll love. They're just fantastic. We'll talk about what Ivy Plus schools actually are, what they mean. Talk about why you might want to think about applying to one, things to consider when choosing to apply to an Ivy Plus school. We'll go over some general application requirements and what's expected. Then we'll talk about some tips to help maximize your chances of acceptance. And then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have questions throughout this, pop them in the Q&A box and we will get to those at the end. Additionally, we are recording this webinar and we'll send it out in an email in the next few days, probably Monday or Tuesday, so you can watch it at home, revisit the information. All right. So Jennifer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I've been with Quad Education for several years now, and prior to that was working as the director of high school guidance at a selective secondary institution where I also was IB program coordinator. So I know a lot about the International Baccalaureate program. I got my degree undergraduate from Harvard University, and then I was abroad in Japan where I did my graduate studies and went on to run study abroad programs across the country, including at Washington University in St. Louis, where I also worked with pre-med, advising deans and students who were interested in pursuing that degree program. Nice to be with you today.
Thanks, Jennifer. I know I've heard your bio quite a few times, and every time I'm always amazed. Fedjounie, would you like to introduce yourself for us?
Unlike Jennifer, amazing experiences, Jennifer. I went to Princeton University for my undergraduate, and I am also currently working with them in their admissions department, supporting students. I am very passionate about helping students understand and navigate this complicated college application process, because I know that it can stand as a barrier to a lot of students actualizing themselves. So I'm excited to be here with you all and giving you all the great tips and info about Ivy Plus schools.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fedjounie. It's always great to have you. All right. So let's dive in and just talk about what Ivy Plus schools are. You may have heard the term, you may not have heard the term. So let's talk about it. Jennifer, do you want to start us off?
Sure. And this terminology developed in recent years to reflect schools that are routinely in the top 20, 25 schools in the country, which is an ever-changing game, right? Depending on what rankings you look at, that list changes. US News and World Report, very importantly, has just announced that they are going to be removing certain categories from their list of criteria for creating their list of schools. So the 2024 list is anticipated to be quite different because they're going to remove alumni giving and other categories. Be that as it may, these are the top academic schools by a variety of rankings and metrics that fall outside of the Ivy League. The Ivy League is a historical group of 8 universities that are clustered in the northeast part of the US. Historically, they were founded earliest in our nation's history. The Ivy Plus schools, the terminology developed because it's a comparable education. You have top academic opportunities and research opportunities offered by schools such as those on this list. It does, it's a slightly nuanced and subjective read as to which schools get included year on year as these rankings change and schools move up and down in them. But basically, you want to be thinking that I need the same qualifications as an applicant to be considered competitive at these institutions as I would at Harvard, Yale, Princeton. And they're going to also, many of them have a focus on undergraduate education. And that's something that we're going to be talking about more today.
Fantastic. Fedjounie, anything else to add there before we move on?
No, I think that there are often a lot of different attributes to the Ivy Plus schools that aren't necessarily highlighted in terms of their student support resources and other aspects that students aren't aware of because of the Ivy League and how it outshines them. But they have very comparable educations, and there are a lot of opportunities at all of these colleges as well.
Fantastic. So I know, Jennifer, you just touched on this a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about what the difference is between an Ivy League and an Ivy Plus.
The main difference between Ivy Plus schools and the Ivy League is that, as Jennifer said, like the Ivy League is concise of 8 specific schools from the Northeast region that were kind of the first universities founded in the country. So this includes Yale, Princeton University, Columbia University, Harvard University, Dartmouth College, and Cornell University. I may have missed one. Oh, University of Pennsylvania. So those are the 8 Ivy League schools, and they are typically very competitive. So at Ivy schools, the yield for an admission cycle is typically like 5%, like that is the acceptance rate for most of the students in comparison to some of the Ivy Plus schools. You'll see, we talk a little bit about acceptance rate in our next point, but yeah, that is the major differences. The time in which the school was created and the primary location.
I think was part of it having to do with like the sports league that they were in too. Is that like the sports league they competed in? And that's where the Ivy League name comes from.
Yes. So most of the Ivy League schools compete together in like the NCAA category. So they're like a Division I. They're within that Division I category, exactly as you're saying, Haley.
Yeah. All right. So as Fedjounie just said, we'll talk a little bit about acceptance rates, and then also median scores that we tend to see for acceptance of these schools. Jennifer, you want to take this away?
Sure. So you can see undergrad enrollments range from the smallest at Caltech, but they tend to be between 4,000 and 7,000 students in the general range. The admits are in the upper single digits or lower double digits. WashU's acceptance rate is no longer 15%. It's lower now. And schools that offer something to be aware of is that schools like Washington University in St. Louis or Johns Hopkins, others that offer both early decision 1 application deadlines in November and early decision 2 application deadlines in January, are filling between 50 and 60% of their entering class with the ED1 and ED2 decisions. So if you're not going to be a candidate who selects one of these institutions as your top school and indicates so by an early decision binding commitment, we'll talk about that, you're going to face an even more competitive application review process in the regular decision round, because you're going to be competing with a larger number of applicants for 40% of the available spaces in the entering class. So the acceptance rate varies by major. There are more competitive majors and less competitive majors, and it varies by application timeline and process. So this is an average acceptance rate, but it would be highly variable, and that's why you have us at Quad to help you guide you through those nuanced things, because we're very up on all the latest trends. Looking at the scores, what you need to know about these scores is that they're not a range. You don't want to be in the middle of them. This is a marker of the highest score that the lower 25% of applicants got, and the upper range means the lowest mark that the upper 25% of the students got. So we're going between 25% and 75%, or the first quartile and the top quartile. You want to be as close to the top number as you can be. And that's not to say that that's going to guarantee your admission, either with GPA or scores, but it is going to make it easier for you to get in the door to be considered for admission, along with a whole host of other students. And that being said, every year there are students below the lowest number on this scale who do gain admission. It's just a much more intricate road. And usually there's other compelling factors that would weight their application and give them favorable consideration. Maybe they have outstanding achievements nationally or internationally in their field of study, or a particular extracurricular activity that would make them a notable applicant. So this is just to give you a basic understanding that you need to be getting the top scores in order to be considered as a competitive applicant at these schools. And there's a whole discussion about test optional, and we can get into that in the Q&A. Basically, schools are moving from test optional to it's a good idea to submit your scores. That's the general takeaway.
Awesome. And I think we should also say this list is not fully, this is not every Ivy Plus school on this list. There are others that fall into this as well. This is just an example of some of the popular ones you may have heard of. But you can find lists on Ivy Plus, hidden Ivies. There's a whole different, Ivy subcategories on different websites. And as both Jennifer and Fedjounie said before, it changes pretty regularly as stats change as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the benefit. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Want to highlight an amazing point and kind of like extend what Jennifer said, like in terms of these test scores, it is in your benefit to push forward and try to reach a score that you feel confident in, higher in that 25th percentile. But if you do struggle with test taking, there are some supports that Quad Education obviously offers, but also ways that we as advisors can help you with boosting some of your qualitative kind of applicant supplements, so your essays, your recommendations, right? And the ways that you talk about your extracurriculars that can push you ahead as a candidate, because sometimes numbers aren't everything. They drive this process a lot, but think about ways that you can amp up other parts of your candidate profile to really stand out as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So let's talk about some benefits about applying to an Ivy Plus school.
Yes, so as we hinted at earlier, there are a lot of benefits to applying to an Ivy Plus school, which include obviously the academics, the prestige and reputation as well. Students have at a lot of Ivy Plus schools connections to renowned faculty, as well as some of the best curriculums in the world. Students are given exceptional resources such as computer labs, right? Libraries on campus that have millions of books, right? And things that really push you ahead when you are researching and trying to develop as an academic within your specific field, right? There's also a factor of prestige and reputation. We know that a lot of career-driven or like opportunities are given to students because of their networks of connection. And a lot of Ivy and Ivy Plus schools, their primary focus is to help students in developing that networking skill early on, starting their freshman year and continuing to connect with internships as well as other students, right, across institutions within their specific institution, so that when they are entering the world, they have a broad network that they can access. And a lot of the times what people don't highlight is that connection that students are able to make with professors as well, if they are hoping to continue their studies or if they're thinking of going into a career path afterwards. These spaces are often where students have some of the most intimate relationships with their professors that propel them forward.
Fantastic. I think, can one of you just highlight that you don't necessarily need to go into an Ivy or an Ivy Plus to get a good education and have a good college career and be successful in your career later?
Oh. Yes, that's definitely true. Like you don't absolutely have to go to an Ivy Plus or an Ivy League school to be successful in your career after that. Like a lot of other schools have great connections. And thank you for bringing that up, Haley, because sometimes we get in the Ivy Plus bubble, but a lot of competitive universities that aren't necessarily even in the top 20 create some of the most powerful people, right, in our world. So you can't discount or discredit that.
Fantastic. Jennifer, anything to add here before we move on to the next? All right. So let's talk about some more benefits.
Sure. And the networking and alumni connections at a number of these universities are very strong. And typically it's an easier approach if you have attended the same institution to reach out through the alumni office or the career center to ask for mentorship, internship opportunities. It's always noted where, you know, oh, you went to the school that I went to, let's talk. And so that can be a very helpful thing. Again, this is going to be on offer to you, whether like my parents, you attended the University of Maryland, College Park, and went to a large flagship state university. They're going to have great resources for you as well. Or if you're successful in your quest to attend one of the nation's top universities. So wherever you end up, you want to make sure to be using the resources that are provided for you. One, I was at Washington University in St. Louis. I served as an undergraduate 4-year academic advisor. And that university had 4-year academic advisors with an undergraduate for their entire career. You didn't get a first-year advisor, and then you lost that connection when you declared your major and got your major advisor. So you had all kinds of advising going on. And you need to, it'll behoove you to look at the advising structure of the schools that you're interested in. Make sure that you're going to have good support there. There's often substantial endowments that some of these schools have that have been, you know, carefully amassed over the years and are able to provide great resources such as libraries and research labs and facilities that are really state of the art. So within your discipline, it's also useful to look at what kind of research is being conducted, what opportunities there might be for you that you can add to your classroom experience through.
Yes, really great points, Jennifer. I wanted to add as well, it's great to focus on a couple of the benefits that we've shared during your search process, just utilizing those categories as ways to navigate different schools' websites, right? You'll usually go there, you'll see undergraduate admissions. And once you click on that, they'll have different titles that talk about like student opportunities or like faculty members. You can read specifically to learn about what professors who work there are doing, right? Often it is that the educator that makes the institution or drives students to be better. So just reading the bios or learning about what the academics in your field are interested in can really help you in better navigating your application process and also answering some of those academic interest questions.
Great. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, so what to consider when you're thinking about applying to an Ivy Plus school? And some of this falls into what you should be considering when you're building your college list as a whole, but you really want to take these things into consideration when you're thinking about applying to schools with below 10% acceptance rate.
Yes, so when you are considering applying to Ivy Plus school, you should be thinking about whether that school offers interdisciplinary approach or whether like it's a hands-on experience or an industry-specific partnership kind of school. Some school will offer different opportunities, right? There are some schools that are known as feeder schools, where a lot of big companies will come to the schools for specific career events. And it's often that you see graduates from these universities taking advantage of internships and job opportunities straight out there, straight out at these companies after attending these universities. Think about just your intended major as a whole and the opportunities that are linked to that major. Some major departments have study abroad opportunities for majors, right? Like this isn't specific to language majors. At Princeton, our engineering department had study abroad opportunities for students who wanted to do an engineering project in Spain, right? Like, so there are a lot of different ways that you can look at your academic interest and how it intersects with those other opportunities. We would also like to really consider location. Especially if you're a person who knows you can't stand the snow. Maybe Chicago may not be the school for you, right? Thinking about who you are as a person, what is your preference, right? Do you want to live in a bustling city? Would you like to be in a school that's within close proximity, right? Like everything is within reach? Or are you going to Rutgers, New Brunswick, where you have to take a bus to get from one end of the campus to the next, right? Location, as well as just proximity, right? A lot of us want to be close to our families. A lot of us want to be able to better understand maybe New York because we want to work in New York. So thinking about all of these different aspects and how they'll affect that final choice.
Yeah, and something that I would add there is just to be aware that while it is very important to do your best academically and on the standardized testing, that is just not going to be sufficient for admission. I talk to parents every year who are like, but my child has a 4.0 and they got a 1600 or a 36. And I say, yes, and so did thousands of other students. And so it's what is the fit between you and the school and what is going to differentiate you from a whole host of other highly, highly qualified applicants. It's necessary but not sufficient to have the best academic profile that you can possibly have and to do your research so that you know your why. Why are you interested in the school in terms of the majors and everything that we've been talking about?
Absolutely. I think that's definitely such an incredibly important piece of this. All right, so a few more things to be considering.
Yep. So other things to be considering, obviously, is the cost. I was the daughter of first generation university students who were elementary school teachers. We were not a family of means. And that meant when it came time to make my college decision and where I would be attending, that I had a combination of merit aid and financial aid. Some of it was grants and some of it was loans. And you need to very carefully consider the loan indebtedness that you and your family are going to be taking on for your college journey. I paid off my college loans in my mid-30s. It was an investment that I made. It meant that I couldn't do other things after graduation. My friends were buying cars. My friends were doing things. They were traveling. I was paying off student loans. And so it was a decision that I made, and I don't regret it for a minute. It's a huge ROI for me in my life. But you need to go in with your eyes open and know what your exit strategy is. Be sure that you're going to be able to afford the full year, the full 4 years, not just 1 year. And in my advising work at universities and colleges over the past couple decades, I have seen student after student just try their hardest and have to leave in sophomore year without a degree and with debt. That's not the story that we want for you and your family. Family circumstances change. We can't always predict things, but it's very important to use the net cost calculator, be very, very frank and upfront as a family, looking at the costs that are going to be for the whole duration of your academic time there. And very importantly, as well as campus culture, this is a place where you're going to live, not just study. and you need to feel comfortable, whether it's aspects of diversity that are important to you that you want to make sure are reflected in the student body and that there's support for, in terms of advising and programming, whether it is size, the athletic culture, whatever it is, that's an important aspect of how a place feels. It's possible to get that from virtual tours and websites. You can get a sense of things. It's really great if you have the opportunity to visit a few schools or participate in outreach activities where the schools are coming to your local community. If you ever see that, you want to go. But you know, in a sense, it comes down to some intangible factors. You will definitely, and this is something I encourage my students to do every year, don't feel like you have to visit every campus before you apply. You can learn about a school on its website. You need to go if you're going to do an early decision November application where you're promising to attend if you get in. You need to go to that school. You don't want to promise to attend someplace that you've never been, if it's all possible. But after you apply in the spring of your senior year, many of these schools have admitted students days or weekends where families and students can come and get a sense of what the school is like, because maybe you've gotten into 2 or 3 schools and you're making a decision. So don't feel like you have to do it all in the summer of your junior year before you apply.
Fantastic.
Really
One
good
thing,
points.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to tack on top of admitted student stays. Some schools have fly-in programs for students, so you could even fly in before the application process, like deadlines and things. For that, you would search on the school's individual website, and they typically publish that information about their fly-in program. I know that Tufts University has a fly-in. Some of the schools within the California Consortium, the Pomona, Smith College, like some of those schools, they also have fly-ins. So if you are interested in a school, I would say check to see if they offer that kind of opportunity, or even like diversity events, like local events like Jennifer was highlighting earlier. And on return of investment, also think about the school's opportunities for if you want to continue your degree, right? Like a lot of students are thinking about getting a doctorate or an advanced degree after getting their undergraduate. So really research and think about the relationships that you're able to make with faculty in those short times when you're on campus visiting, or if you've emailed and reached out to someone. Like, think about how those relationships are nurtured earlier on, or talk to students about how they feel they get to connect with faculty members, because they are ultimately important to that secondary, like tertiary education advancement process as well.
Perfect. And then I guess this is a question that I know comes up quite a bit when with regards to cost. Should, the cost that's you see online for a school, if you know that that's kind of not feasible for you, should that deter you from applying to that school? Or is it worth finding out what financial aid and scholarships you could potentially get that would help you along?
Yeah, it's definitely worth taking the time to fill out the FAFSA form that your family will complete, or yourself will complete if you're an emancipated student. It's very important to be aware of merit aid that's given, that is considered independent of financial ability. And some schools have a separate application process for merit scholarships. Some schools have a holistic review that they just award that as part of the review process, but no one's going to tell you up front what that number is going to be. You have to actually go through the process and do your best on your application to be evaluated and considered for it.
Yes, most definitely, Jennifer. And a lot of schools typically publish a sticker price, what it's known as, and that's sometimes inflated price, right? It covers room, board, and tuition, but it will have some miscellaneous costs that are subjective to the person. So if you are traveling, right, a school may estimate students typically spend $3,000 to travel, but if your family is going to take a road trip to bring the student there, that might just be a $200 expense in that semester. But thinking about the necessary costs and what you will need to feel whole and supported as a student there on campus as well. Because a lot of the prices don't include the price of socialization, the price of being an active member on campus as well. So it's two-sided, it's like a double-edged sword, but think of that.
Awesome. And that's something definitely like quad education can help you with as well. So you can talk to your counselor, schedule a consultation, and we can help you through deciding that, as you know, it's such a personal decision. All right. Just a couple more things here.
Yes. So another aspect to really consider is the research opportunities at some universities. I know that a lot of applicants are STEM focused now, and within a lot of STEM fields, there is a requirement that students have experience, and it often boosts your applications, job applications, graduate school applications, if you already have some research experience under your belt. And it also enriches the application process for you because you have things to talk about, right? And interviews and things like that. So understanding the opportunities that your future university may provide for undergraduate research is very important. I know that at Princeton, we have research ingrained into our curriculum. So all of our students have to do some sort of junior independent project and submit a senior thesis, but some schools do not require senior thesis at all. So if you are a person who knows that you want to work on a publication, that you're interested about researching a specific field or of some sort, please check in to see if the universities you're interested in even offer those opportunities for undergrads, because some schools, as Jennifer said, tend to focus on graduate students as well, if that is their intended purpose. And another point is just alumni network, right? Exploring the strength and the reach of the alumni network, right? That even goes as far as your ability to come back to the school to use resources as an alumni. I know that a lot of schools offer career success support well into people's alumni experiences, or you'll still have access to the school's library, right? So I am at Columbia for my master's now, and as a Columbia graduate, I will always have access to Columbia's library, my email and things like that. And these are important as it relates to success and moving on, but also strengthening those relationships. You're going to be in school for 4 years, right? And you want to know that the people that you're building this life with, that you can continue to communicate with them or attend like reunions or alumni talks and events well into your adulthood. Because as I'm realizing now, 6 years out of graduation, it's really hard to connect with the people that you knew in college on the day-to-day when life gets to be a little real. But keeping track of those valuable connections and opportunities after graduation mean the world in a lot of instances.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about general application requirements. And I know we touched on some of this a little bit earlier, but we'll dive in a little bit deeper. Yeah, Jennifer, take us away here.
Sure. So this is the nuts and bolts section of what you need to do to apply. So each school is going to have a connection to the Common App, and that is the place, if you haven't heard of that already, where you'll spend a lot of time in your junior and senior year creating an account, uploading your demographic and background information. All of your materials get centralized there. You write a main essay, and then it's actually the way that you submit your application materials to each school. Schools then, on top of the Common App materials, activity lists, and personal statement, will ask for a supplemental essay that is specific to their university and sometimes specific to the school, college, department that you're applying to within the university. So it can get quite micro level. Then, as we've been discussing, your SAT or your ACT scores, your AP scores are going to also get submitted this way, your IB scores, whatever program you've come through. And, you know, doing, as we've been saying, doing your best is important, recognizing that it's not going to gain you admission, but it is, for many schools, we're shifting back from test optional to test considered. And the top schools will either look at your AP scores if you don't submit SAT or ACT scores with a little bit more focus, or they'll be expecting that you can demonstrate through standardized testing that you're up for the rigors of their curriculum. So as it's been communicated to me with some colleagues in the field, it's now becoming more of a, I wonder why they didn't submit their score than 2 years ago. It was, we can't submit our scores, so no one's submitting scores. So it's just important to be aware of that. And the younger your student is, or if we have students on today, the younger you are, and the longer you have until you're going to be submitting your applications, then the more that trend is going to move in that direction. For GPA, for unweighted, it needs to be just right up at the top. Schools will take a look at a transcript and see a B minus in the 9th grade year and recognize there was a transition to high school. You had issues with one subject, and then they'll look at the trajectory after that and see that you figured it out. You showed that you're resilient and creative and problem solving, and that you found a way forward. Or some of my students have had a tough semester. The pandemic was tough. Online education is not for everyone. That's why we meet in person. So maybe you had a dip in a semester, and there's a section of the Common App where you can explain what happened. Maybe you had a health challenge. Maybe you had a family illness or emergency that impacted your academics. So there's understanding for that, but it needs to be contextualized. And other than that one area, the schools that we're talking about today are really looking for academic excellence. It's one of the key components that they value at their institutions. So they're looking for students who have that demonstrated ability.
All right. So some other aspects of the application.
Yes, thank you, Haley. So two very important aspects of your application, along with your test scores and Common App, are your letters of recommendation, as well as your personal essays. I like students to think of these as opportunities to really reflect two factors or like aspects of your identity. My students often pick one topic, right, to focus their personal essay on. So within the personal essays, you have your personal statement, which is typically a 650 word maximum document. Some students write a little more, some students write a little less. It depends on what you need to convey your narrative to admissions committees about your interests in undergraduate education. And there are a lot of different nuances to writing a great personal statement that we can get into a little bit later, but your advisors at Quad Education are here to help you think through those processes, brainstorm, write, rewrite, draft, edit. I want you all to think of it as a very iterative process. You are not going to write one personal statement and that will be the final draft. Like, you want to polish this and refine it until it is something that you can be proud of, something that you feel represents you. truly. And then your letters of recommendations are an opportunity to connect with teachers and school faculty to enhance your application. Often it is recommended that students get letters from their core subject teachers. So this is your English, your mathematics, your science, your history courses, as they are places where you can demonstrate some of more of that rigor, that academic rigor. But students are also welcome to, outside of those two core course recommendations, to send a recommendation from a coach or an art teacher or someone that can speak to a different interest that you have, right? Even pastor or religious person. But there are definitely opportunities when asking for your letters of recommendation to kind of secure, not necessarily secure, but guide your recommender to the kind of letter that you would want to write. It's recommended that you waive your right to read the letter, because that allows admissions committees to read it a bit less unbiasedly. So I typically have my students in their emails to their teachers kind of outline ways, right? Like, I'd love it if you talk about my skills as a classroom discussant, or I would love it if you talked about the project we worked on when you were my advisor of FBLA, right? Giving those specific examples, as well as a brag sheet or a resume, to help your recommenders write a very positive and thorough recommendation that kind of reflects on some of the key aspects that you want to highlight for admissions councils, okay?
Fantastic. All right, let's go over some tips to help maximize your chances of acceptance. And then, so we'll go through these fairly quickly, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have questions, pop them in the box and we can dive into those in just a minute or two.
Yep, so to summarize, we've been talking throughout our time together today about how the academic achievements that you have had in high school are predictors of future academic engagement. So schools are looking for that demonstrated intellectual engagement in the field of study that you're interested in pursuing in university. That can be shown through, you maxed out your coursework in your high school. You were then taking some community college coursework. It can look like you found an opportunity over the summer to do some independent research. It can look like really extensive creative pursuits in fine arts, in music, in dance, whatever your passion might be. So you want to be thinking about how to show like an intellectual maturity and really like a depth of curiosity, not just I took tests well and got good grades. Because that's awesome, that's great, but it's not what the schools are looking for in totality. So keep that in mind. And then, as we've been saying, the standardized test scores are more and more considered. So definitely, if you have an area that needs support, get that support. There are free resources online. There are resources through Quad. There are workbooks that you can get. It's practice, 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 just like anything, because it's a test-taking strategy, skill set, as well as the content that's being assessed.
Great. And then just a couple more.
Yes. So two very important tips. Please focus on participating in extracurricular activities. These are an opportunity to really amplify your candidate profile. Think about the clubs, sports, or like community service opportunities, research projects, or if it is an art showcase, right? Any pursuit that kind of aligns with your interests and helps you showcase your talents as a high schooler is definitely going to benefit your applications in the long run. I spoke a little more, a bit about this earlier, right? Like the ways to navigate obtaining a strong letter of recommendation. So I won't go too deeply into it. But always, always, always think of individuals who can attest to your abilities, character, and potential for success. You never want to get a letter of recommendation from someone that if you ask them, they're like, why would you want me to write a recommendation for you? You know, like you can tell sometimes if someone isn't going to write you the best letter of recommendation. And even if they are a core subject teacher, it may be better for you as an applicant to find someone else who would speak to your work.
Absolutely. And all of these things we just covered, we do have previous webinars on. Feel free to go find those on our website, on YouTube. They exist and are there as a resource for you and dive into detail on these subjects. All right, we'll wrap up this slide and hop into the Q&A.
Yeah, so as I'm summarizing, just go ahead and start dropping your questions into the chat so that we can get those questions answered for you. Just the last point is, again, that the essays are your opportunity to present yourself to a group of people you're never going to meet. I do alumni interviewing, or I did. I don't right now, it would be a conflict of interest, but I used to do alumni interviewing for Harvard, and that was, you know, a part of the admissions process, but it's not always a possibility for you to be able to meet someone from the school that you're attending or hoping to attend. So you want to be thinking about conveying yourself as a whole person. They call it the Common App personal statement for a reason. The University of California personal insight questions, right? They're wanting to get to know you as a person. And then a lot of the supplemental essays will be talking about your academic interests and your goals for your time at the institution. So you want to be thinking about stories and showing aspects of yourself that are really going to capture the imagination and stay with an admissions officer who's read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications that week. And how are you going to really stick in their memories and tell something that's compelling in your narrative?
Fantastic. And the essays as well, we do have, I think, probably 4 different webinars on how to write those, tips and tricks, how to brainstorm. So feel free to look at those. And you see a question asking if the quad team helps with essays, and we absolutely do. We'll work with students on the brains, like every part of the personal statement journey.
Yeah, I want to speak to that a little bit, because sometimes people expect a little bit more editing or crafting, right? It's very, very important in this day and age that the student's voice is what is communicated. And so your educational consultant with Quad will be helping you outline, will be helping you think about, okay, what's your experience? What topic does it match best with? What do we want to make sure that we highlight? We have a lot of strategy that goes into this. And then we're definitely revising for, you know, the structure of the essay, the form, the content, all the things, but we don't do a rewrite. We want the writing to belong to the student. And so we're making suggestions throughout and we're giving tips and pointers. And it's super important that it's the student's writing.
Thanks. I really appreciate that clarification. I think it's very important. Let's see. So I've heard varying opinions on this, but is it necessary to take and do well on both the ACT and SAT, or is it advantageous to simply get a good score on one of them and focus your time, the rest of your time on applications, recs, other areas?
Yes, I can take this question. So it's typically recommended that students select one test, like choose the test that you're going to do. Some students take pre-exams, right? You can find full length exams online. You can get books at the library that have it to take a pre-test to figure out which test speaks more to you, or just do background research to understand, right? Like some students aren't strong with the sciences, so they may not take the ACT because the SAT doesn't necessarily focus on science education. So understanding what both tests offer and then selecting one is more advantageous, because then you're able to focus on one test strategy, as Jennifer talked about earlier, right? This test is about both content and strategy, but it's not the same strategy for both. So if you're learning both tests and trying to take both, you'll have too many things going on all while you're trying to be a high schooler, which may get overwhelming. But yes, focus on one test and focus your time on your applications in other areas as well.
Great. Are there any Ivy Plus schools that offer scholarships?
I know that many schools do, and some of them are named and have an application process that's separate from the application process to the school. Washington University in St. Louis has a full tuition room and board scholarship that's called the Danforth Scholars Program that was named for the previous chancellor of the university. And that has an application deadline that's in December prior to the regular admissions deadline. So you want to make sure to be researching this. It's all going to be available on the website of the school. Your quad counselor can help you identify any programs, opportunities that are either within the school itself, or there's a lot of external scholarships as well that we help our students apply to, that might have deadlines that are even ahead of the January application deadline. So it's super important to be on top of all of those.
Great. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Definitely talk to, the schools, look on their websites and do your research early for those. See, for international students, are there any like upper limits or like quotas for specific countries? And like, I guess, like the number of applicants that they'll accept?
So I think every school's answer to that question is going to vary a bit. Schools are looking for a range of admits from different states in the US and different countries. So there's no, not to my knowledge, is there a school that would have an actual number that they would say, we're looking for this number of students from XYZ location. That being said, there are trends in enrollment, both from certain high schools in the US. I had a number of students I was working with on REA, the restrictive early action applications to Ivy League schools in the fall of last year. And then some students that I was also working with who were aiming for the January round, and they watched classmates of theirs get admitted from the 12th grade from the same school. And they knew, like, okay, if 4 people have already gotten into Stanford from my school, my application is not going to really be that successful, because after a certain point, we don't want to bring in my whole high school into the university. So there definitely is a view towards balance and equity and opening opportunities to students from a variety of schools and states and countries. That's a very key component of admissions decisions.
Great, thanks for that answer. So when Ivy Plus schools are reviewing your application, are they more so comparing your application to other applications from your specific school? Or are they comparing the application to all applicants regardless of school? And I think you just touched on this a little bit, Jennifer, but
yeah, the answer is yes. Both. They're certainly comparing you as a student to their own values and looking at the applicant pool holistically. And they are also looking at, the admissions officers who work in your region, they know your school. It's their job to know your school. And if an applicant from your school has never applied to that institution, it does happen. And then they learn about your school and they contact the head of your school, the college guidance director, whomever there is to speak with, who's the designated outreach coordinator for your school for colleges, and they get to know your school. And it's important that they do that in order to be able to contextualize grades from one institution as compared to grades from another institution, and trends and et cetera over time. So all of that, we're a data-driven industry, right? Schools are heavy into looking at data and looking at trends, and they're definitely paying attention to all of that information, whether it's school specific or whether it's for the broader applicant pool.
Yes, within that same vein, all schools, when you apply on the back end, your counselors are required to send a school profile. So they'll get all of that information about your school as well, and it'll help them contextualize you as a student. I can take the next question.
Great. The next question is, do Ivy Plus schools look at demonstrated interest? And then this will just be the last question. I know that we're up on time, but we absolutely want to cover it.
Mhm. So the answer is yes. Most Ivy Plus schools, like as Jennifer said, they track data. So it can go down to the most minute as how, like if you open the email that they sent you, right? Like they can track all of this information. I know that a lot of Ivy Plus schools will track students' participation in like diversity events or like info sessions and webinars, but some do not. So that is it. It depends. It's very subjective. It depends on the school, but most do track demonstrated interest or will even reach out to students for specific opportunities if they inquire about like specific clubs or programs, organizations, and things.
Great. All right. And we just have one last question, so we'll answer that very briefly. But if anyone needs to hop off, I just want to thank you all for attending today and be on the lookout for that email. So if you're relying on financial assistance and get accepted through early decision, but don't get financial assistance, what kind of are your options forward there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad that you asked it because it actually is the one way to exit a successful early decision application. And it's specified in the documentation that you sign. You're basically indicating when you select an ED school that you will attend that school unless it is not financially possible for you to do so, i.e. if the financial aid offer, which you will not get in December when you get the admission offer, that comes later in the spring. So you can accept the offer. You can, if that's your case, you want to accept that offer and then not withdraw your other schools applications because there is a chance that you might not get the financial package. If you get the financial package, you're committed to going, you withdraw all your other applications. So that's a nuanced, and again, we can provide more guidance on that individually, but it's definitely the one way that you can decline an early decision offer.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Jennifer, Fedjounie, it was really great to have you both here. Everyone asked amazing questions. Feel free to reach out to us if you have further questions or questions that are specific to you and your personal situations. We're here to help with those things. And I hope everyone has a really great Saturday afternoon. Thanks for spending some of it with us.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.